So this is crazy to me that I'm recording the last lecture. It has really been a real pleasure working with everyone and learning with you, and I appreciate all the thoughts and hard work that you've put into this short 6-week semester, and I wish everyone the best and would love to hear from you and where you end up. So please stay in touch. All right, so we're going to talk about social psychology. Um, social psychology is a scientific study of how people's thoughts, feelings, and actions are affected by others. So I want to introduce some key concepts here. So social influence is the social groups or individuals that exert pressure on an individual, whether that's deliberate or unintentional. A group is defined as two or more people who interact with each other, perceive themselves as part of a group, are interdependent, and develop and hold norms. And norms are what's accepted in that society. So one thing that I think that's really important to note about social psychology and what makes it such a rich, dynamic field of psychology or subfield of psychology is that social psychology is culturally dependent. So there are general principles that are the same as we see with different approaches to therapy, but they're not identical across different social groups. I also want to introduce the idea of stereotype, which is a set of generalized beliefs and expectations about a specific group and its members. A prejudice is either a negative or a positive, and I didn't learn this till today or till I was working on this lecture. Evaluation of a group and its members. So you can have a positive prejudice. Discrimination is when the behavior of a person is directed towards an individual on the basis of their membership in a particular group. So, current news, there's a lot of debate about Donald Trump's approach of Muslims, and he has, some would say or could say that he is discriminating against anyone who practices the Muslim religion because of ISIS. And so he's proposing all these different ways to vet, as he says, and they have to take a test. And so, some people are concerned because this is this is not Ellis Island in the early 20th century. So, some basic questions are: what are attitudes? How are they formed, maintained, and changed? How do people form impressions? And what are the likely causes of their behavior? And what biases influence the ways in which people view other people's behavior? So social psychology is not just looking at our thoughts, but also how our thoughts shape behavior. So, persuasion. When we think about persuasion, it's I'm persuading you, I'm convincing you to do something different or think about something different, right? So Hillary Clinton is trying to persuade America to think the way she thinks. The same as for Donald Trump. So they are, we as voters are evaluating, we're trying to see what our attitude is. And we're trying to evaluate a person or their belief system, their campaigns, strategies, and so forth. And the things that factor in leading to a change in attitude is: what's the message source, right? So where's the message coming from? What are the characteristics of that message? And who are the characteristics of the target, right? So I think when we think about prejudice, this theory, there's a social identity theory that suggests that people tend to be ethnocentric. So that means that we view the world from our own perspective and judge it others in terms of their group membership. So there are in groups and out groups. And we've seen this ethnocentric principle in other areas. In particular, we've seen it within the child development, is that what 3-year-olds are not ethnocentric. I guess you could call them ethnocentric. I don't think they don't judge per se, but they are egocentric. And so they're really focusing on viewing this world from their own perspective. And so as I'm talking about this, in the beginning of the semester, I talked about the research I did with processing emotion from different racial, from faces that were of different races. And what Yahoo News did was said that babies were bigots, or that babies were racist. And so I was talking about it from a perceptual point of view, but the media interpreted it as if I was sort of talking from the foundations of prejudice. So it's an interpretation. I love this idea of cognitive dissonance. So it's basically when you have two contradictory thoughts going on at once. So I smoke, but smoking leads to cancer, which causes dissonance, right? So then you have several ways of sort of justifying this discrepancy between it. So you can say, oh, I really don't smoke that much, or the evidence is really weak that smoking causes cancer. So you're changing the perceived information of the cognition. You're denying that there's really, you're in denial. There's no evidence. Or you are sort of justifying it, adding, I exercise so much, it doesn't matter that I smoke. So you modify, change, add, or deny to justify basically your behavior and the difference between your thoughts and your behavior. Social cognition is understanding others. So the way we understand and make sense of others and themselves, a concept we have seen before. So schemas before were the framework in which we learn, but now schemas in terms of social cognition are the framework in which people learn about social experiences. So how we organize this information in stored memory, it gives us a mental framework to recognize, categorize, and recall information, and then it helps us predict what others' behaviors are likely based on relatively little information. So I just want to sort of show that social psychology is a very complex subfield, but it's taking the very basic principles that we've talked about over and over and over again. So understanding others in terms of social cognition, you form impressions. All of this information is sort of it's built off of like these personality concepts with traits, right? So understanding others is defined as the process by which an individual organizes information about another person to form an overall impression. The building blocks, it's the basic building blocks that shape our social behavior, right? Forming impressions. Central traits are considered really vital in forming impressions of others. So kindness, agreeableness, friendliness, loyalty, humor, how generous you are. So all of these central traits sort of, if you think about Scrooge, right? Or the Grinch that stole Christmas, their friendliness is not very high. But then you think about, I don't know, Santa Claus, and Santa Claus has a high friendliness factor. So, I want to sort of think about conformity and what that means. You know, we're going through a lot right now in our country in regards to treatment of people in general, but in particular, this Black Lives Matter movement. Um, so I want to sort of think about giving you the facts to evaluate, are you conforming? And so what's conforming? Conforming is when you change in behavior or attitudes brought about by a desire to follow the beliefs or standards of other people. So the one could say this, you know, Trump is really famous for this idea of building a wall, because we need to build a wall because some immigrants are okay, but some immigrants are not, and Mexico has to pay for the wall. But the people in his who support him are conforming to his views, just as for Hillary Clinton, she has a different set of values, and you know, there's so many things to talk about in this way, but she's trying to get everyone to conform to hers, right? So it's a natural social strategy and instinct, especially when you are in a position of power. Um, so I want to sort of end on this fabulous, amazing experiment, which is very controversial, but that looks at the study of conformity to social rules. So the conformity, it influences behavior through social rules. So what are the expectations for people who occupy a given social position? So to test this, Philip Zimbardo and his colleagues at Yale um, did a study looking at the guards versus the prisons. This was actually something that's difficult for me to watch, because it's scary how real, how in some ways, if you tell someone what their role is, how they will conform to it. But what it illustrated was that it engages behaviors in ways that are atypical when you're under the social roles. And so when you're conforming, you feel that you go under compliance. You submit to that direct social pressure of this is your role, so this is what you need to do. And so what happens when you comply is that your behavior is a certain behavior that occurs in response to direct social pressure. So another study that I think is very interesting and was foundational to sort of looking at social conformity, excuse me, was the obedience study. And this was the Milgram study. And so I've posted a video. It's optional, but it is basic. It is footage and an interview with Stanley Milgram. I do want to warn you, though, that it does have some scary images from the Holocaust in the beginning of it. I'll post this video. Okay, so you've seen this video. Um, you've read about conformity. You've learned about the pilgrims. I'm sorry, the prison study. So the summary slide that I want to leave you with is sort of think about it. What would you do in this experiment if you didn't know that they were being deceitful and there really wasn't a person on the end? Would you actually press that button? Um, how can you use this information of these people who conformed? Because it's not like the participants were evil. They were, as the book says, to err is human. And then, you know, think about, were you surprised about the Milgram study results? And sort of what are the ethical dilemmas with this study? And that concludes the last lecture. So thank you so much.